Welcome, restless dreamer. You've just stepped into the shadows of sleep, where stories whisper and the darkness listens. I'm your guide tonight, your voice in the void, here to lead you gently into nightmares wrapped in lullabies. Before we begin, press like if you're brave enough, and subscribe for more midnight tales that blur the line between sleep and terror. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what hour has found you? Mara Bishop had always found comfort in the quiet hum of the Channel 6 radio booth. It was the graveyard shift, midnight to 4 a.m., when most of the world was sleeping, and the lonely tuned in for some semblance of a human voice. She'd been doing this for 12 years. A sip of lukewarm coffee sat heavy in her stomach. The playlist rolled on autopilot, soft rock, weather updates, a trucker's request. It was routine, predictable, safe. Then the call came. No ID, just unknown caller blinking across her monitor. Her headset buzzed softly in her ear as she answered in her usual calm voice. "This is Channel 6. You're on the air." There was no response, just the sound of faint breathing. Mara frowned and leaned forward. "Hello?" The breathing trembled. Then came a whisper. "There's someone in the house." She straightened in her chair. "You're on a live broadcast. If this is an emergency, I can contact the authorities. Can you tell me your name?" A pause, then a soft, childlike voice. "My name's Annie." Mara's stomach dropped. The line crackled. "Mommy's not waking up. I think he hurt her. Annie, I need you to tell me where you are." "The house on Riverbend Street, the blue one with the porch swing." Mara's breath hitched. She hadn't heard that address in 20 years. It was her childhood home, burned down, condemned, left to rot after the tragedy. She hadn't stepped near it since the night her father... "Are you alone?" she asked carefully. "I'm hiding, just like you told me to." Mara's skin turned to ice. "Where?" "In the basement, under the laundry room, behind the old wall." No one else knew about that crawl space. No one. "This is a prank," Mara whispered, her hands trembling. "I don't like it down here." Annie's voice quivered. "He's back. Daddy's back." Something in the room shifted. The booth lights dimmed. The equipment buzzed. Mara's monitor flickered, then showed 000 where the clock should be. "Annie, what year is it?" "I don't know." "You said you'd come back. You promised." Mara's throat tightened. "Annie died," she said aloud, not realizing her mic was still hot. "That night, I ran. I told her to hide and I ran." The voice sharpened. "And I did hide. I waited." The door to the soundproof booth creaked. Mara turned, heart pounding. "Empty. I needed you," the voice whispered. "You never came." "Stop," Mara said, removing her headset. The call was still playing, without a headset, without a speaker, echoing from somewhere inside the room. "You can still fix it," Annie said. "He's coming for you now." Suddenly, all the screens in the booth turned black. Then white text typed itself across them. The floor beneath Mara's feet vibrated. She looked down. Concrete, turning to wood. Her radio booth was vanishing, replaced with old creaking floorboards. Yellow wallpaper. That smell. Mildew, rot, and something else. She wasn't in the station anymore. She was home. The house stood just as it had in her nightmares. Blue paint peeling, porch swing swaying without wind. Her car sat idling behind her, radio still crackling Annie's voice. "Come back, please." She stepped inside. No dust, no decay, just perfect preservation of a place frozen in time. Her mother's china sat untouched on the shelves. The wall clock ticked, though its hands spun endlessly. Each step creaked. The floorboards remembered her weight. She moved to the kitchen. Blood stained the tile. Still wet, still red. The spot where her mother had fallen. Killed for defending Annie. "Annie?" she called out. No response, but a soft laugh echoed from the basement door. Mara's hand trembled as she reached for it. The steps descended deeper than she remembered. Shadows wrapped around her like water. She heard the hum of an old furnace, the squeal of rats, the whisper of her name. Then, a voice. Low, male, familiar. "You came back." Her father stepped from the dark, or what remained of him. His eyes were hollow, mouth too wide. His body half rotted and soaked in static, like he was part man, part interference, a walking corruption. "You left her," he hissed. "You let me take her." Mara backed away, but the stairs behind her were gone. Only brick walls. She was weak, he growled. Just like you. No, Mara whispered. You were the monster. He lunged. Mara screamed and ran deeper into the dark until her fingers found the wooden slats of the crawl space. She ripped them open. Inside, a small figure huddled in the dark. Annie, she breathed. The girl turned, hollow-eyed, blood on her dress. You left me, Mara. Why didn't you come back? Mara dropped to her knees. I was scared. I was only a kid. But I'm here now. I came back. Behind her, footsteps thudded. Her father's shadow loomed again. Annie stared at her. Will you stay this time? Yes. The walls shook. The basement groaned. A high-pitched whine erupted as the father screamed, a sound like tearing fabric and shrieking metal. Then, light, bright, blinding, and warm. Mara awoke, gasping on the floor of the Channel 6 booth. The clock read 4 a.m. Everything was normal. Her headset buzzed. Mara, you okay? We lost your feed for an hour. She looked around. The booth was fine. No static, no phantom voices. But something in her was different, lighter. Later that morning, Mara drove to the town cemetery. For the first time in 20 years, she visited her sister's grave. A simple stone, overgrown. She laid down fresh daisies. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. As she turned to leave, her car radio clicked on. Thank you, a child's voice whispered. Mara froze, then smiled. For the first time in decades, she felt peace. The radio static was different that night, sharper, almost metallic. Mia had been working the night shift at the remote mountain dispatch center for nearly 7 years. She knew the rhythm, long stretches of silence broken by a call about a lost hiker or a wandering deer. The forest around them was vast, dark, and silent, save for the occasional rustle of wind through pine needles. But tonight, the static hummed with a strange energy. She glanced out the window. The pine trees stood like silent sentinels under the pale moonlight, casting long shadows on the snow-covered ground. Inside, the glow of the radio console was the only light in the small, cramped room. Mia rubbed her tired eyes and turned her attention back to the radio. Another night alone, listening for a voice to break the silence. Dispatch, this is Ranger Ethan. All clear at Checkpoint 6. Cold night out here, came the crackling voice through the radio. Mia smiled softly. Ethan was new, on his first solo patrol of the forest. He had a nervous but steady voice, one she had grown fond of over the last few weeks. Copy that, Ethan. Keep safe out there, Mia responded, jotting down his check-in time. Minutes later, Ethan's voice returned, but this time it was tinged with unease. Dispatch, there's something up ahead, a figure, standing right in the middle of the trail. Mia's fingers hovered over the radio controls. Can you describe it? Tall, wearing a long dark coat. No visible face, just a smooth blankness. Standing perfectly still. Mia's heart quickened. Stay inside your vehicle. Don't approach. Ethan hesitated. It's moving. No, it's gliding. Not like walking. It's coming toward me. The radio crackled, Ethan's voice breaking with panic, then static swallowed the channel. Mia's voice was urgent now. Ethan, respond. Ethan, do you copy? Only static answered. She alerted the supervisor, who dispatched Ranger Mark to investigate. Minutes felt like hours as Mia tried to raise Ethan again, but only eerie whispers seeped through the static, voices calling for help, distorted and chilling. Mark arrived at Ethan's last position to find the Ranger's truck abandoned, engine running, door swinging open. No Ethan. On the gravel, Mark spotted signs of a struggle, or something else. Ethan's boots were arranged carefully on a nearby rock. His badge hung from a low tree branch, as if placed there with intention. Mark radioed Mia, his voice tense. This isn't right. Something's out here. Days of research uncovered local legends, disappearances, strange figures, and a forest that seemed to swallow people whole. Mia's heart sank as she listened to the radio channels bleeding with faint, desperate calls, voices of lost rangers begging for help, twisted by static into mournful wails. The static became a sinister symphony, bone chimes ringing softly, faint sobs echoing through the radio. Mia felt the oppressive weight of the forest pressing in on her, even miles away. Mark returned to the forest, determined to find answers. "I see it again," he radioed, voice trembling. That faceless figure, standing just beyond the tree line. He approached cautiously, but the figure dissolved into shadows. Then Mark was gone. His last message was a whisper. "The face, it's not a face." Mia's dread grew. The forest refused to give up its secrets. Search parties found no trace but empty echoes and eerie silence. Back at dispatch, Mia was haunted by whispers through the static. Her co-workers warned her to stop chasing ghosts, but she couldn't let go. One night, the radio hissed her name. Objects shifted inexplicably around the dispatch center. Cold spots sent shivers down her spine. Mia realized the forest's darkness had followed her, its tendrils reaching through the radio waves, trapping voices in a limbo of static. Driven by fear and guilt, Mia ventured near the forest edge, radio clutched tightly. The whispers grew louder, calling her deeper into the woods. In a moonlit clearing, the faceless figure waited, its form flickering in the cold air. The world twisted, static swirled, reality bent. Mia felt herself slipping, caught between worlds. With a trembling voice, she sent a desperate plea over the radio. "Help me." The radio went silent. The dispatch center closed. Forest patrols halted. Occasional hikers spoke of ghostly rangers frozen in conversation, vanished without trace. And sometimes, on nights when the static is just right, distant cries echo through the forest, desperate calls for help fading into the sound of bone chimes. The forest waits, hungry, for the next lone soul to wander into its dark embrace. Alex had grown accustomed to the predictable hum of the city police dispatch center. Nights were slow, often filled with the soft tapping of keyboards and the occasional bark of a radio call, drunken fights, traffic accidents, or the odd lost pet. Tonight was no different, or so Alex thought. But just past midnight, the radio crackled with an odd sound. A call from a place that shouldn't have had a working line anymore. Ravenswood Asylum. Closed for decades, abandoned and sealed after rumors of abuse and malpractice had spread like wildfire. No one had lived there for years, and the property had long since fallen into disrepair. The call was brief. Silence followed by a faint whisper beneath the static. Then nothing. The line went dead. Moments later, another call. Same pattern. Same chilling silence. Alex shivered. Memories of old urban legends flickering in the back of her mind. Whispers of tortured souls trapped inside those crumbling walls. Voices never silenced. She tightened her grip on the headset and keyed the mic. "This is dispatch. Can you hear me?" Only static answered. Officers James and Maya, patrolling near the old asylum grounds, were dispatched to investigate. The asylum's facade loomed like a shattered relic of another age. Ivy strangling stone walls, windows boarded haphazardly, and the rusty iron gates barely hanging on their hinges. A thick fog curled around the overgrown yard, muffling footsteps and swallowing sound. As they approached, faint chanting echoed from deep within, a low, rhythmic hum that sent a cold shiver down Maya's spine. James shone his flashlight on the walls. Strange symbols scratched into the peeling paint, geometric shapes that twisted and pulsed under the beam's glare. They found an old basement entrance hidden behind a collapsed staircase, its door ajar and faint light flickering inside. With weapons drawn, they descended into darkness. The basement stretched far beyond expectation, lined with tables cluttered with medical instruments, notebooks filled with scribbled patterns, and old stereo equipment emitting a continuous drone. At the center sat a circle of pale teenagers, their heads bowed, voices raised in a haunting chant. Leading them was Dr. Whitman, a man with piercing eyes and a disarming smile that felt wrong. His calm voice explained their purpose, erasing trauma through guided rebirth, a therapy blending drugs and rituals. On the teens' arms, glowing geometric tattoos shimmered faintly under the emergency lights, as if alive. The chanting swelled, radios crackling with interference, making communication nearly impossible. The teens' vacant, dilated eyes followed the officers, unmoving but intensely aware. Realizing the danger, James and Maya moved to arrest Dr. Whitman and free the teens. But the group reacted as one. Their chanting rose to a deafening crescendo, warping the air itself. Walls seemed to breathe, shadows twisted and reached. Some teens lunged with unnatural strength. Others fled deeper into the asylum's twisting tunnels. Chaos erupted as officers struggled to regain control amid the encroaching darkness. Separated from Maya, James wandered through a maze of corridors that seemed to shift and twist. Hallucinations overwhelmed him, distorted memories, whispers of past victims, and visions that bled into reality. His identity fractured as the asylum's sinister power clawed at his mind. Meanwhile, Maya uncovered Whitman's journals, detailed records of identity erasure, rewriting minds until only hollow shells remained. Desperation mounting, Maya searched for James, battling the asylum's nightmarish grip. James confronted Whitman in the heart of the labyrinth. Whitman promised peace through rebirth, urging James to surrender his fractured self. The air pulsed with unnatural energy as James fought to hold on. Maya arrived just in time, helping subdue the therapist and breaking the trance over the teens. As the chanting ceased, the teenagers collapsed, dazed but alive. The asylum was sealed, its horrors exposed but far from forgotten. Recovered teens began the long road to reclaim their stolen identities. Back at dispatch, Alex sometimes hears faint whispers through the static, a chilling reminder that some voices never truly fade. The echoes of Ravenswood linger, waiting. Blackwood had always been a quiet town, the kind of place where time seemed to stagnate like the rusted steel of its forgotten railway bridge. Locals would tell stories about the old bridge, where a century ago, a train had derailed during a violent storm, plunging into the gorge below. Dozens were killed, many of them children returning from a summer camp. The tracks were never rebuilt, and the bridge stood like a skeletal monument to tragedy, iron bones creaking in the wind. Over the years, the stories became darker. Drivers crossing the nearby road at midnight swore they saw children standing on the tracks, pale and barefoot, silently watching as headlights passed. Others heard phantom train horns echoing through the valley, though no train had run there in decades. Few stopped to investigate. Blackwood wasn't a town where you lingered after dark. Rookie Officer Daniel Price adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, the patrol car rolling quietly through the outskirts of town. It was his third month on the job, and so far, the night shift had been uneventful, mostly traffic stops and noise complaints. Sitting in the passenger seat was Sergeant Evelyn Ross, her sharp eyes scanning the road ahead. "Swing by the bridge," she said, not looking up from her thermos of lukewarm coffee. Daniel shot her a glance. "The Blackwood Bridge? Isn't that place condemned?" Evelyn smirked. "Yeah, but kids still go there to smoke and drink. Last thing we need is some idiot falling off a 100-foot drop." The car's headlights cut through the fog as they approached the old railway bridge. It loomed in the distance, its rusted frame silhouetted against the moonlight, like a beast crouched over the gorge. Daniel felt an inexplicable chill as they slowed to a crawl. That's when they saw her. She stood in the middle of the tracks, maybe 9 years old, barefoot, wearing a torn white dress that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Her long dark hair hung in tangled strands, unmoving despite the night breeze. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, just stared straight ahead, her pale skin almost glowing. Evelyn's expression hardened. "What the hell?" Daniel's instincts kicked in. He switched on the dash cam, grabbed his flashlight, and radioed dispatch about a possible missing child. Evelyn was already stepping out of the car, her voice calm and maternal. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Are you hurt?" The girl didn't move. She didn't even look at Evelyn. As Daniel got closer, he noticed something strange. Her feet were spotless, free of mud or grime, despite standing on rusted, dirty tracks. Her posture was unnatural, as if someone had posed her like a doll. Evelyn crouched down a few feet away, her hand outstretched. "It's all right. We're here to help." Then the sound came, a low rumble, like distant thunder. The steel rails vibrated underfoot, and Daniel's heart froze. It was the sound of a train. Daniel whipped his flashlight toward the horizon, but the tracks stretched into darkness, empty and silent. Still, the rumble grew louder, like something enormous barreling toward them. He turned back, and the girl was gone. No sound, no movement, nothing. She had vanished, as if she'd never been there. Evelyn cursed under her breath. "Did you see where she went?" Daniel shook his head, a cold sweat breaking across his neck. "No, she just disappeared." They scoured the bridge, shining their flashlights under every beam, calling out for her. But the night gave no answers. The silence was suffocating. Eventually, Evelyn ordered them back to the car, her face pale and tense. Back at the station, they reviewed the dashcam footage. Their patrol car headlights illuminated the bridge, Evelyn calling out softly, but there was no girl. The video showed the two of them talking to empty air. Daniel couldn't shake the image of the girl. That night, he dreamed of her standing on the tracks, reaching out a hand, whispering words he couldn't understand. When he woke, he swore he heard the faint echo of a train horn fading into silence. The next day, he dove into local archives. Old newspapers told the story of the Blackwood derailment, a tragedy that had claimed over 40 lives. Among the victims was a 9-year-old girl named Eliza Turner, last seen wearing a white cotton dress. The deeper he dug, the more unsettling the details became. Some of the children's bodies were never recovered. Rumors suggested they'd been claimed by the gorge, trapped between the living and the dead. 3 nights later, a call came in. Hikers had reported seeing children playing near the bridge at dusk. Evelyn wanted to write it off as teenagers, but Daniel insisted they investigate. The fog was thick that night, swallowing the beams of their flashlights. As they stepped onto the tracks, Daniel froze. There were footprints, small, barefoot prints leading down the center of the bridge. They followed them cautiously until the mist parted, and they saw them. Not just one child, but 6, pale, silent, standing hand in hand across the tracks. Their faces were blurred by shadow, but Daniel could see their eyes, dark and hollow. The steel beneath them began to tremble. A sound, metal grinding, wheels screeching, grew louder, closer. Then, out of the fog, a train emerged. It wasn't real, at least, not in the way it should have been. The train glowed faintly, its cars rusted and broken, flames flickering in shattered windows. Inside, Daniel saw faces, children, staring blankly as the train roared past, their hands pressed to the glass. The girl in white stood at the front, her black eyes fixed on him. She raised her hand, beckoning. Daniel felt himself stepping forward, as if pulled by an invisible thread. His heart pounded, his body moving without his permission. Evelyn grabbed his arm, yanking him back just as the train screamed past and vanished into nothingness. The silence that followed was deafening. Shaken, Daniel dug deeper. He discovered an engineer's journal, evidence that the train derailment wasn't an accident. The engineer, distraught over his own daughter's death, had intentionally crashed the train, taking the lives of dozens of children. Daniel became obsessed. He believed the spirits were trapped, unable to move on, and that the girl in white, Eliza, wanted him to help them. But Evelyn warned him, "You can't save what's already dead." Daniel returned to the bridge one last time, dragging a reluctant Evelyn with him. Midnight draped the valley in silence. The girl appeared again, standing alone on the tracks. This time, she looked directly at him. Her voice was a whisper carried on the wind. "Help us." The ground trembled as the phantom train materialized again, roaring down the tracks. Its glow illuminated the children inside, their faces pale and pleading. Daniel took a step forward, lured by her gaze. Evelyn screamed for him to stop. With one last look, the girl reached out, and then the train exploded into sparks and mist. When the fog cleared, all that remained was a small, rusted locket on the tracks. Daniel picked it up. Inside was a faded photograph of Eliza. Weeks later, Evelyn retired. She refused to speak of that night. Daniel, however, couldn't let it go. He kept the locket in his pocket, and every night he swore he could hear faint whispers, childlike voices echoing in his apartment. One stormy evening, Daniel drove past the Blackwood Bridge. His headlights cut through the rain, and there she was, the girl in white. But this time, she wasn't alone. Dozens of children stood behind her, their black eyes locked on him, waiting. Mason Hale had worked the overnight shift at Lou's roadside diner for almost 3 years. He liked the quiet, how after midnight the world seemed to slow to a crawl. That night, though, the silence felt different, wrong. The fluorescent lights above him flickered once, then again, and the radio, which had been humming along to a soft country ballad, distorted into static. Mason looked up from his coffee, heart skipping. Somewhere beyond the glass doors of the diner, something moved. He stepped out from behind the counter, frowning. Hello? His voice barely carried over the sound of the static, which now had a strange, rhythmic pulse to it, like breathing. The parking lot was empty except for the reflection of the neon sign, but he felt a presence. It wasn't just outside. It was around him, pressing in, like the air had grown thick and heavy. He froze when he saw a figure, tall, impossibly thin, and standing just outside the edge of the neon glow. "Do you need help?" Mason asked, though his throat had gone dry. The lights flickered hard, plunging the diner into near darkness. When they came back, Mason was already walking toward the door, calm, hypnotized, his hand reaching for the glass handle. The cameras caught his back as he stepped outside. At 3:07 a.m., the footage cut out for exactly 7 minutes. When the cameras returned, Mason was gone. Detective Laura Briggs had been on the force long enough to know that some cases never made sense. Mason Hale's disappearance was one of them. She stood in the empty diner now, her boots squeaking on the freshly mopped floor. A cup of coffee sat on the counter, still warm, the steam curling into the stale air. The register drawer was open, but nothing had been taken. Mason's phone was still plugged into the wall. The place felt wrong, as though something had taken the life out of it. "Another ghost story," muttered Officer Yates, who was bagging evidence behind the counter. Laura didn't respond. She wasn't superstitious, but something about this scene made her uneasy. She'd been investigating a string of vanishings, and this case felt connected. 2 days later, another call came in from a different location, this time a gas station on Highway 7. A young night clerk, Rebecca Tran, had vanished under nearly identical circumstances. The lights were on, the doors unlocked, and the security feed had glitched out at 3:07 a.m. for 7 minutes. When it returned, Rebecca was gone. Laura reviewed the security footage from both cases side by side. Mason and Rebecca had both looked toward the entrance, smiled slightly, as if greeting someone they knew, and then static. A perfect, surgical cut in the footage. The hair rose on the back of her neck. This wasn't random. She interviewed Rebecca's mother, who revealed something strange. "She called me the night before she went missing," the woman said. "It was just static and this clicking noise. I thought it was a pocket dial, but there was something in the static like breathing." Laura didn't sleep that night. She drove Highway 7 at 2 a.m., the road dark and empty. At 3:07, the radio in her car suddenly hissed with static. For a split second, she swore she heard whispering. Digging through county records, Laura uncovered something chilling. Both the diner and gas station were built on land that had once belonged to a town called Ashwick, which burned to the ground in 1965. The fire had been so fast, so violent, that no one escaped. Survivors from nearby towns described seeing a man made of smoke walking the streets during the fire. Locals now called the legend the Visitor. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the coroner's reports. The fire had taken 7 minutes to consume the entire town. Laura decided to stake out Lou's roadside diner, the scene of Mason's disappearance. She parked her cruiser just beyond the neon glow and waited, her camera trained on the door. At exactly 3:07 a.m., and the lights in the diner flickered. Her camera screen warped into static. Then she saw him, the visitor. He stood just beyond the glass doors, tall and faceless, his form shifting like smoke. Laura's pulse spiked. She gripped her gun and called out, "Police! Stay where you are!" The figure didn't move. Instead, she heard a whisper. Laura, her name. She stepped forward, just 1 foot, before forcing herself to stop. Something about the presence clawed at her mind. The air thickened, and for a second she couldn't breathe. Then, darkness. When her vision cleared, she was standing in the middle of the diner's floor, 7 minutes gone from her memory. The camera showed nothing but static. Laura's investigation led her to Rusty's Diner, the last open business on Highway 7. She warned the night clerk, Ellie, but Ellie shrugged it off. "It's just a story to scare people," Ellie said, laughing nervously. Laura stayed with her, waiting. At 3:07 a.m., the power snapped off. The hum of the fridge died, and the entire diner went silent. Then came the breathing, low, slow, and wet, like someone standing just behind them. The front door creaked open, though no one touched it. "Ellie," Laura whispered, "don't move." The shadow entered the diner. It was taller than the doorway, its faceless head turning toward them. The temperature dropped sharply. Laura grabbed Ellie's wrist, but the girl jerked, frozen in terror. The visitor's hand, more like smoke than flesh, reached for her. "No!" Laura shouted, but the lights cut out. When they returned, Ellie was gone. Her half-finished cup of coffee still sat steaming on the counter. The realization hit Laura like a hammer. The visitor wasn't just haunting these places. It was hunting. The diner, the gas station. They weren't just random locations. They were anchors, built where the fire had burned the hottest. The visitor fed on loneliness and routine, taking people who were isolated, people who didn't notice the signs until it was too late. Laura found a half-burned matchbook in the parking lot, its faded logo reading, Ashwick Motel. It was the same kind found at every scene. She pocketed it, a grim resolve forming in her chest. On her final night, Laura parked her cruiser near the ruins of Ashwick, the abandoned foundation of the old town barely visible under the moonlight. She rolled a match between her fingers, her body tense. "Come on," she whispered into the dark. "I know you're here." At 3:07, the air turned suffocating. The visitor stepped out of the shadows, taller, darker than she remembered. Its faceless head tilted as if studying her. Then, in a voice like wind through broken glass, it whispered, "Laura, you left him, her brother." She stumbled back, heart pounding. The visitor's whispers clawed at her mind, trying to lure her forward. "No," she hissed. "Not this time." She struck the match. The flame flared in the dark, and the visitor recoiled, its smoky form wavering. Laura threw the lit matchbook to the ground, chanting the names of Mason, Rebecca, Ellie, and the others. The visitor screeched, its body collapsing into ash and vanishing in the wind. Laura collapsed, unconscious. Laura woke at sunrise, the sky painted in hues of red and gold. She was alone on the highway, the ruins of Ashwick silent behind her. Back at the station, her captain told her the cases were closed due to lack of evidence. The diners were boarded up, the gas stations abandoned. But when she reviewed her Bodycam footage, her blood ran cold. At 3:07, the screen turned black for exactly 7 minutes. That night, Laura drove past Rusty's diner. In the glass window, she saw a reflection that wasn't hers, a tall, faceless figure standing just behind her, waiting. Detective Laura Kane had never believed in ghosts, not until the night the crying began. The Red Hollow police station was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against the eardrums and made every creak of the old building sound like a scream. Rain tapped softly against the high windows, trailing dark lines down the glass. The station's age was impossible to ignore. Its brick walls bore scars from the days when it served as a courthouse, and its cells were cramped, their iron bars streaked with rust. Most officers joked that the place was haunted, but Laura had always laughed it off. That Friday night in October was different. She felt the weight of the silence as soon as she stepped inside. It was 11:30 p.m. when the phone rang, its shrill tone breaking the stillness. Laura flinched and grabbed the receiver. "Red Hollow PD, Detective Kane speaking." For a moment, there was only static. Then, a man's voice came through, low and shaking. "She's outside," he whispered. "She's crying again. Please, please, you have to stop her." "Who's outside?" Laura asked, her voice steady, but her pulse quickening. The line went dead. Laura stared at the receiver for a moment before slamming it down. Checking the caller ID, she saw it came from a payphone near the edge of town, right where the forest began. She stepped out of the station to take a look. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but mist curled around the street lamps, glowing in pale halos. The road beyond the parking lot led directly into the tree line. That's when she heard it. A soft sobbing, faint, distant, like a child weeping far in the woods. "Hello?" she called, her voice echoing. "This is the police. Do you need help?" The sobbing stopped. A chill ran through her as she strained to listen. For a moment, there was only the hum of the rain and the faint crackle of the station's neon sign. Then the crying started again, closer now. Laura gripped her flashlight and slowly backed into the station, locking the front door behind her. Something about that sound was wrong. It wasn't just sadness. It was calculated, like someone was trying to lure her out. As Laura made her way past the holding cells, she froze. Cell No. 2, which had been empty all night, now held a man. He sat in the far corner, thin and hunched, his wild eyes gleaming under the dim overhead light. His clothes were soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead as if he had just walked through the storm. "Who the hell are you?" Laura demanded, her hand instinctively moving to her holster. "How did you get in here?" The man looked up and smiled faintly. "I've been here all along," he whispered, his voice raspy. Laura felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Don't move. I'm getting the keys." But when she tried to unlock the cell, the key wouldn't turn. The lock felt jammed, rusted, as though it hadn't been used in decades. The man leaned forward, his grin widening. "Do you hear her?" he asked. "She's crying again. She wants in." The sobbing returned, louder now, this time inside the walls. Laura bolted to the surveillance room. Her heart pounded as she switched on the monitors, each one showing a grainy black and white feed of the station's exterior. On the screen facing the parking lot, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure, small, barefoot, walking slowly through the mist toward the front doors. The closer it came, the more distorted the feed became, horizontal lines of static cutting across the image. The child's face was blurred, almost as if the camera couldn't focus on it. Laura grabbed the radio. "Unit 3, Unit 5, anyone nearby? I need backup at Red Hollow Station. Now." Only static answered her. When she turned back to the monitors, the figure had vanished. Laura returned to the front desk, her flashlight in hand. She froze. The station's front door was wide open, rainwater pooling on the floor. The sobbing had stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence. Her instincts screamed at her to leave, but something wrong, pulled her toward the holding cells. When she reached cell number 2, her breath caught in her throat. The man was gone. The cell door was still locked. No signs of tampering. It was as though he had simply vanished. From somewhere deep in the station, a faint humming began. A low, tuneless hum, like a lullaby sung under one's breath. Laura's flashlight flickered. Desperate for answers, Laura remembered the old case files stored in the basement, records from when the station had served as both a courthouse and jail. She raced downstairs, the humming following her like a shadow. The basement smelled of mildew and rust, the concrete floor slick with moisture. Pulling open an old cabinet, she scanned through yellowed folders until she found one marked 1978, Jacob Miller. Her hands trembled as she read. Jacob Miller, arrested for the abduction of 2 children. Before his trial, he had hung himself in cell No. 2. The children's bodies were never found. Witnesses at the time claimed to hear crying around the station for weeks after his death. Detective Kane. Laura spun around. In the corner of the basement stood a little girl, no older than 7, barefoot, wearing a torn white dress. Her skin was pale, her eyes 2 hollow black voids. Laura's breath hitched. "Are you hurt? Where's your family?" The girl tilted her head, her mouth twisting into something between a smile and a grimace. "You didn't save us," she said softly. "He's still here." From the shadows behind her, the gaunt man from cell number 2 stepped forward, his grin stretched impossibly wide. Laura ran. She bolted up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind her. But when she turned down the hallway, it wasn't the station she knew. The building had changed. The hallways stretched longer than they should. The doors were in the wrong places, and the lights flickered like candle flames. The crying surrounded her now. Children's voices, dozens of them, overlapping, wailing, and whispering. She grabbed her radio, voice shaking. "This is Detective Kane. I need immediate backup at Red Hollow Station. There's someone here." The line cut out, replaced by a child's voice whispering through the static. "Stay. Play with us." Laura stumbled back into the front lobby. The front door was closed now, locked from the inside. On the wall above it, written in wet, dark streaks that dripped like blood, were the words, "She wants you to stay." Her flashlight beam caught movement. The girl stood in the middle of the lobby, head tilted, smiling. Laura backed away slowly, her breath quick and shallow. "What do you want?" she demanded. The girl's smile widened. "We just want you to listen." Suddenly, every phone in the station started ringing. The sound was deafening, echoing through the building. The girl's face twisted, and she screamed, not with the voice of a child, but with something guttural, ancient, and wrong. The lights blew out. The next morning, when the patrol units returned, The station was empty. Laura's car sat untouched in the lot. Her radio lay on the floor near the front desk. The last footage on the CCTV cameras showed Laura standing in the lobby at 2:14 a.m., staring into the camera with wide, terrified eyes. Behind her, a pale child's hand slowly reached for her shoulder. It was a rainy November night at Eastbrook Police Station, and the cells were almost full, mostly drunk drivers and petty thieves. But cell B3 held a man no one wanted to talk about. His name was Raymond Cole. Cole had been arrested for trespassing near an abandoned orphanage on the outskirts of town. The place was infamous for its tragic past. A fire decades ago had killed 12 children and their caretaker. The property had been left to rot ever since. Mark had been there during Cole's arrest. He remembered the way the man had smiled, whispering, "They told me to come. They're still singing in there." At 12:14 a.m., as Mark was filling out reports, a faint sound drifted down the hallway. Crying. He thought it was one of the drunks sobering up, but when he checked, the sound was coming from cell B3. Cole sat perfectly still on the bench, staring at the wall. The crying wasn't his. "Where's that sound coming from?" Mark asked. Cole smiled, his teeth yellow and cracked. "You hear them now, don't you? The little ones. They like you." Mark's skin prickled. "Cut the crap. Who's in there with you?" Cole just tilted his head. "You can't see them yet." By 1 a.m., things got worse. The cameras in cell block B started glitching. Static rolled across the screens, and sometimes, just for a second, Mark swore he saw small shapes moving in the footage, shapes the size of children. Then Officer Harris, who was doing rounds, screamed. When Mark rushed down the hall, he found Harris collapsed near cell B3, his face pale, eyes wide open, lips trembling. He whispered only one word before passing out. "Hands." Mark glanced inside the cell. Cole was still sitting there, calm and smiling. But the walls were covered in wet handprints, tiny handprints. By 2 a.m., everyone on the night shift was on edge. The sobbing and whispering had spread, echoing from cell to cell. The prisoners were panicking, shouting, banging on their doors. Mark turned to Officer Ray. "I'm calling for backup. We're moving Cole out of here." But Cole began to laugh. A slow, rattling laugh that made the hairs on Mark's neck stand up. "You can't move me," Cole said. "She's already inside." "Who?" Mark demanded. Cole leaned forward, pressing his face to the bars. "Mother." Moments later, the power went out. The station plunged into darkness, the emergency lights flickering red across the hallways. The cells slammed shut automatically, trapping everyone inside, including Mark and his team. From down the corridor, a soft voice began to hum, a lullaby. Officer Ray whispered, "Who's singing?" Mark shook his head, drawing his sidearm. "Nobody. There's nobody here." But the humming grew louder, turning into laughter. As Mark moved closer to cell B3, the temperature dropped. His breath came out in pale mist. Cole was no longer alone. In the far corner of the cell stood a little girl in a scorched dress, her face half burned, her hair clumped and blackened, her hollow eyes fixed on Mark. "You let us burn," she whispered. Mark froze. "What? What are you?" The girl tilted her head. "We were waiting for someone to hear us. Now we have you." Before Mark could react, every cell door began rattling violently, the prisoners screaming as unseen hands grabbed at them from the dark. Mark ordered everyone to the control room to reboot the locks. But as they moved, the corridor stretched unnaturally long, the walls closing in like the building was breathing. Ray muttered, "This isn't possible. This isn't real." Then the lights went out completely. Mark felt something small grab his ankle. When he pointed his flashlight down, dozens of blackened, childlike hands were reaching from the floor, their burnt fingers clawing at his boots. He fired his gun, the sound deafening in the corridor. The hands vanished. They reached the evidence room, hoping to exit through the back door, but it was locked tight. On the table inside was something Mark had never seen before, an old charred music box, still playing that same eerie lullaby. Cole's voice echoed behind them. "She's here. She's always been here. The fire didn't take her. It made her stronger." Mark turned to see Cole standing free outside his cell, but the door had never been opened. By dawn, only one officer was found alive. Mark. He was discovered sitting in the parking lot, soaked in rain, his eyes blank. The inside of East Brook Station looked as if a fire had swept through it overnight. Walls scorched black, cells melted. There was no sign of Cole, no sign of the prisoners. Mark whispered only one thing before being taken to the hospital. "She's still singing."